because I think this section is very important, I'll go through it again. The Channel 4 Dispatches programme has told us that we learn secret meetings have taken place between government officials of the UK government and representatives of US pharmaceutical firms, where the price of National Health Service drugs has been discussed. Mr. Speaker, we have a Prime Minister who will say anything, do anything to get his way. He will avoid his responsibilities. He will avoid his responsibilities, break his promises to dodge scrutiny. And today he wants an election and his bill. Well, not with our endorsement. He says he wants an election on the 12th of December, though how can we trust him? How can we trust him that he will stick to that date? When we do not yet have legal confirmation of the extension. The Prime Minister has not formally accepted, and the other 27 have not confirmed following that acceptance. The reason I'm so cautious is quite simply I do not trust the Prime Minister. A 12th
Order. I don't know whether the Prime Minister was seeking to intervene.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid that the Right Honourable Gentleman Leader of the Opposition is mistaken. As I always said, this government obeys the law. We comply with the law, and that has taken its course. Parliament asked for this delay. Now it's up to him to go to the country in a general election. That's what he should do.
That's not a matter for the avoidance of doubt. Such matters are not matters for the Chair, but the Prime Minister's made his own point, apparently to his own satisfaction. The Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I simply say this to the Prime Minister. If he always obeys the law, why was he found guilty by the Supreme Court?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the issue of...
Order. No, I don't care how long it takes. I'm not having the honourable gentleman shouted down and prevented from being heard. That will not work. End of subject. Mr. Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the issue of trust, which my right friend is quite rightly pointing out, is he aware of the very interesting rumours that have reached my ear that the Prime Minister might, for example, not be planning to even stand in his own constituency at an upcoming general election, and instead apparently has lined up Sevenoaks or East Yorkshire? I wonder if he's heard that rumour.
I'm grateful to my friend for his intervention. I would put nothing past the Prime Minister. All I do know is we have an excellent Labour candidate in Uxbridge.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. And like my honourable friend said a moment ago, I don't trust the Prime Minister either, but there is a deeper issue about whether we can trust the Prime Minister with our safety. Let me just read this to you very briefly. Analysis from the Financial Times today. The Prime Minister could shake his head, but perhaps he would care to listen.
Go on, Paula.
So, when Johnson responded, I have never heard such humbug.
Order. Invite the Honourable Lady to resume her seat. The Honourable Lady has a right to be heard, not to be shouted down by by frontbenchers or back, and she won't be. Paula Sheriff.
Thank you. When Johnson responded, I have never heard such humbug in all my life, Labour MP Paula Sheriff began to receive toxic tweets at a rate of more than 100 an hour. One such tweet from that evening read, "Tough shit, Mrs Shrek. A surrender bill or surrender act is exactly what Ben's treacherous act is." Another read, "Do what the people told you to effing do. Otherwise, yes, expect to be strung up metaphorically or physically." The Prime Minister has never apologised for saying what he said that evening. So how can we trust him that we can be safe.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend for her intervention and for the stoic way in which she's dealt with the most appalling abuse that's been thrown at her. The threats that she's received, the threats that other colleagues have received, the damage that's been done to MPs' offices, and the abusive language that has happened in so many parts of this country. And I will be happy to give way to the Prime Minister now if he wants to get up and apologise to my friend for what he said about her during that debate. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has an opportunity to apologise for the language he used. He seems unable to do so. The treatment she received was disgusting by any standards. And I would also point out that numbers of...
I'll happily apologise if the Shadow Chancellor would, for instance, apologise for inviting the population to lynch the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
Well, sorry seems to be the hardest word, doesn't it? Mr. Speaker.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me that we have a Prime Minister that has a tortuous and difficult relationship with veracity, and therefore he's absolutely right not to believe a single word that comes out of that man's mouth?
I thank my friend for that intervention, and she is right. That is why many of us are very cautious at believing anything the Prime Minister said. We want it tied down before we agree to anything. The 12th of December election is less than a fortnight before Christmas, 9 days before the shortest day of the year. I'll come to you one second. The House must consider that in parts of this country it will be dark before 4 p.m. Many students will have just finished their term and gone home for Christmas. Well, actually, people having the right to vote is what an election is all about. And they risk being disenfranchised.
I thank him for giving way. If we go back to workers' rights, and he correctly says the Prime Minister can't be trusted in workers' rights, so can you explain why he'd backbench Labour MPs who said they secured workers' right concessions of the Prime Minister, why 19 of his MPs actually backed the withdrawal agreement, and if the Prime Minister is so incompetent, is there any point where he's not going to keep him in power?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claimed he would defend workers' rights. All the information in the Financial Times at the weekend suggests that he will not do that at all. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, about students and their opportunity to vote on the dates in question, the latter point may not be the case on the 9th of December, and we will consider carefully any legislation proposed that locks in the date. The theme of this is we don't trust the Prime Minister. We want something that definitely and definitively takes no deal off the table and ensures that the voting rights of all of our citizens are protected. One giveaway.
I'm very grateful to the Leader of the Opposition. If we take him at his word that this is the most untrustworthy government and Prime Minister, wedded to doing the most evil and disastrous things to this country, can he explain to me his reticence for a general election where he has the chance to sweep us out of office?
We have said all along we want no deal off the table. And since there is so little trust in this Prime Minister, we will agree to nothing until it's clear and concrete exactly what is being proposed. And so, Mr. Speaker, we agree that an early election is necessary, but also seek good reason since no general election has been held in December since 1923. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has a bill to deliver. He has a budget to present. He has a Queen's speech, which he himself told us was vital. he should, for once in his life, stick to his word and deliver. He says in his misogynistic way that people should man up. A bit rich for a Prime Minister who at every turn refuses to face up to his responsibilities and serially breaks his promises.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Would he also agree with me that the timing of this proposed general election, not whether we have a general election, is yet another example of the art of voter suppression, ensuring students are less likely to have a vote, older people less likely to go out and vote, people with disabilities less likely to go out and vote. If the Prime Minister truly believed in democracy, wouldn't he hold the election when people were able to go and cast their vote?
Mr. Speaker, when no deal is off the table, when the date for an election can be fixed in law, and when we can ensure students are not being disenfranchised, we will back an election so this country can get the government it needs. One that will end the underfunding of our public services. One will end the privatisation of our services. One that will tackle the grotesque poverty and inequality in our country created by this government and the government before it, and recognises the seriousness of the climate emergency, and one that will rebuild an economy that doesn't just work for the privileged few, as it all the Tory party knows about, but will build a society that ends inequality and injustice and really does give the next generation real hope and real opportunities of the kind of country and kind of world that they can live in.